Ellie sat motionless in the living room, her stepbrother Ryan's hand resting lightly on hers, while the soft brightness of the TV created shadows. His voice was firm and quiet as he said, "You don't have to pretend around me." As his words sank in, she stared at him, her heart racing. She muttered, "Ryan, this isn't right." But she was unable to resist him as he came in closer, his breath warm against her cheek. When her mother remarried and Ryan joined their family, Ellie's entire world fell apart. He was charismatic, self-assured, and had a talent for making people laugh. Ellie initially wrote him off as just another obnoxious sibling. But as the months passed, she couldn't help but notice how much attention he paid to her. She had seen elder brothers in films, but Ryan was different. He was different, almost too attentive. Whether it was helping her with her schoolwork, making her laugh when she was upset, or catching her in quick looks when he thought no one was watching, he would always find an excuse to be close to her. Ellie dismissed it as innocuous at first, but she couldn't deny the mounting hostility between them. Ellie and Ryan were left alone at home one summer evening when their parents made the decision to go out to supper. Ryan sat down next to Ellie with a bag of popcorn while she was snuggled up on the couch, browsing through her phone. "Movie night?" he asked, flashing his signature grin. "Sure," Ellie replied, trying to ignore the flutter in her chest as he leaned closer to grab the remote. They settled on an action movie, the room quiet except for the sound of explosions and car chases. But as the night wore on, Ellie became hyper-aware of how close Ryan was sitting, his arm resting casually on the back of the couch, just inches from her shoulders. When the credits rolled, Ryan turned to her, his expression unusually serious. "You've been acting weird lately," he said, his tone teasing but with an edge of concern. Ellie frowned. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," he replied, his gaze holding hers. "It's like you're avoiding me or something." "I'm not avoiding you," she said quickly, though her voice faltered. Ryan tilted his head, studying her. "Ellie, you can tell me if something's wrong. You don't have to pretend around me." Her breath caught at his words, her heart racing. "Ryan, I'm fine, really." But he didn't let it go. "You sure? Because I feel like there's something you're not saying." Ellie's stomach churned as she looked at him, her mind racing. "It's nothing," she insisted, though the tension between them was palpable. Ryan's expression softened as he reached out, his hand brushing hers. "Ellie, whatever it is, you can trust me." Her resolve crumbled under his steady gaze. "Ryan, this feels different," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What does?" he asked, his tone gentle but probing. "This," she said, gesturing between them. "Us. It doesn't feel normal." Ryan's jaw tightened, his hand still resting lightly on hers. "I know," he admitted, his voice low. "I felt it too." Ellie's breath hitched as his words sank in. "Ryan, we can't," she said, shaking her head. "I know," he replied, leaning closer, "but that doesn't change how I feel." The air between them grew thick as he closed the distance, his lips brushing hers in a tentative kiss. Ellie froze, her mind screaming at her to pull away, but her body refused to listen. The kiss deepened, their restraint crumbling as weeks of tension boiled over. Ryan's hands moved to her waist, pulling her closer as Ellie's fingers tangled in his hair. The living room, once so familiar, felt like an entirely different world, a place where nothing existed but the two of them. "You're incredible," Ryan murmured against her lips, his voice thick with emotion. "And you're insane," Ellie whispered back, her breath hitching as his lips trailed down her neck. The night unfolded in a whirlwind of passion, their connection undeniable as they gave in to everything they'd been trying to suppress. Ellie woke to the soft glow of sunlight streaming through the curtains. Her heart sank as the weight of the night before came rushing back. She sat up, glancing around the living room, only to find Ryan already awake, sitting on the edge of the couch with his head in his hands. "We need to talk," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I know," he replied, his tone heavy. "Last night, it can't happen again." Ellie nodded, her chest tightening. "But it did, and now I don't know how to face Mom and Dad." Ryan turned to her, his expression filled with a mix of guilt and determination. "We'll figure it out," he said. "Together." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening. Ellie's mom called out cheerfully, "We're home. How was your night?" Panic flashed across Ellie's face as Ryan stood, smoothing his shirt. It was fine, he called back, his voice steady. Ellie forced a smile as her mom entered the room, her gaze flicking between them. Everything okay? Of course, Ryan replied smoothly, though his hand brushed Ellie's in a fleeting gesture that sent a shiver down her spine. But as the day wore on, Ellie couldn't shake the feeling that their secret wouldn't stay hidden for long, and that the line they'd crossed was just the beginning of something far more complicated. The weight of their shared secret grew heavier with each passing day. Every stolen glance, every accidental brush of hands felt like a thunderclap in Ellie's chest. She couldn't escape the memory of that night, how his touch had ignited something in her she didn't know existed. But guilt gnawed at her, a constant reminder of the line they had crossed. Ryan was no better. His usual easygoing demeanor was strained, his jokes forced, his interactions with their parents clipped and cautious. Yet, when they were alone, the air between them crackled with unspoken tension, like a wire pulled taut, ready to snap. A few nights later, as Ellie sat at the dining table pretending to study, Ryan walked in, his expression determined. He motioned for her to follow him, his urgency leaving no room for argument. She followed him to the backyard, the cool night air brushing against her skin. "What is it?" she asked, her voice a mix of curiosity and dread. "We need to talk," Ryan said, his tone low. "This thing between us, we can't keep ignoring it." Ellie's stomach churned. "I'm not ignoring it," she replied, her voice trembling. "But what do you want me to say, that I'm okay with what happened? That I don't feel like I'm losing my mind?" Ryan stepped closer, his gaze intense. "I'm not asking you to be okay with it. I'm not even sure I'm okay with it. But pretending it didn't happen is killing me, Ellie." She crossed her arms, trying to steady herself. "So what do we do, Ryan? Tell them? Blow up the whole family?" "I don't know," he admitted, his voice softening. "But I do know that I can't stop thinking about you." Ellie's breath caught as his words hung in the air. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, that this was a mistake they could never make again, but the way he looked at her, like she was the only thing grounding him, made her resolve falter. "Ryan, this is insane," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I know," he said, stepping closer, "but it's the truth." Before she could respond, he cupped her face, his touch warm and steady. "Tell me to stop," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I will." Her heart pounded as she searched his eyes, her own emotions warring within her. But instead of pushing him away, she leaned into his touch, their lips meeting in a kiss that was slow, deliberate, and filled with everything they couldn't say. The kiss deepened, their restraint crumbling as the weight of their shared feelings overtook them. Ryan's hands slid to her waist, pulling her closer as Ellie's arms wrapped around his neck. The backyard, with its quiet darkness, became their haven, shielding them from the reality that loomed just beyond the house. "You're dangerous," Ellie murmured against his lips, her voice thick with emotion. "And you're irresistible," Ryan replied, his breath warm against her skin. The night unraveled in a haze of passion, their connection undeniable as they gave in once more to the pull between them. As they stood in the shadow of the trees, lost in each other, a light flickered on in the house. Ellie froze, her heart leaping into her throat as she saw her mom standing at the kitchen window, her expression unreadable. "Ryan," she whispered urgently, pulling away. He turned, his own face paling as he caught sight of their mom. "She saw us," he said, his voice strained. Ellie's chest tightened as panic set in. "What do we do?" Ryan grabbed her hand, his grip firm. "We face it, together." They walked back into the house, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Their mom stood by the kitchen counter, her arms crossed and her expression a mix of confusion and anger. "Do you want to explain what I just saw?" she demanded, her voice shaking. Ellie opened her mouth, but no words came out. Ryan stepped forward, his shoulders squared. "It's not what it looked like," he began, his tone calm. "Then what was it?" Their mom shot back, her eyes narrowing. "Because it looked like the two of you were." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Ryan hesitated, glancing at Ellie before turning back to their mom. "I care about Ellie," he said simply. "More than I should." Ellie's mom's face twisted in shock and disbelief. "Ryan, she's your stepsister." "I know," he said, his voice steady, "and I know this is wrong, but I can't lie about how I feel." Their mom's gaze shifted to Ellie, her expression softening slightly. "Ellie, Is this true? Do you feel the same way? Ellie's throat tightened, her eyes welling with tears. I don't know what I feel, she admitted, her voice breaking, but it's not something I can ignore. The room fell silent as their mom processed their words, her face a mix of betrayal and heartbreak. Finally, she exhaled, her shoulders slumping. I need time to think, she said quietly, turning and walking out of the room. As the door closed behind her, Ellie turned to Ryan, her chest tightening. What happens now? He reached for her hand, his grip firm but comforting. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out, together. The tension in the kitchen was unbearable as Ellie and Ryan stood frozen, watching their mom walk out of the room. The sound of her retreating footsteps echoed through the house, leaving behind a silence that felt deafening. Ellie turned to Ryan, her breath shaky. This is a disaster, she whispered, her voice trembling. She knows. What if she tells Dad? What if? Ellie, Ryan interrupted, stepping closer, his voice calm but firm. We'll handle it. She shook her head, her hands trembling. How? How do we fix this? Ryan reached out, cupping her face with both hands. We can't undo what's happened, he said softly, his gaze steady. But that doesn't change how I feel about you. Her heart raced at his words, her thoughts swirling. Ryan, this isn't fair. To her, to us. I know, he admitted, his voice breaking. But I can't lose you, Ellie. Not now. Before she could respond, Ryan leaned in, his lips capturing hers in a kiss that was urgent and filled with emotion. Ellie froze for a moment, her mind screaming at her to pull away, but the warmth of his touch, the intensity of his kiss melted her resistance. You're impossible, she whispered against his lips, her voice trembling. And you're irresistible, he murmured back, his hands sliding down to her waist, pulling her closer. Their surroundings faded into the background as they gave in to the fire that had been building between them. Ryan guided her toward the edge of the kitchen counter, lifting her effortlessly as their connection deepened. The moonlight streaming through the window illuminated their entwined forms, their whispered names, and ragged breaths filling the quiet of the house. Just as their passion reached its peak, a soft gasp came from the hallway. Both froze, their heads snapping toward the sound. Standing there, wide-eyed and frozen in place, was their mom. Ellie's heart dropped as her mom's gaze darted between them, her expression a mix of shock and heartbreak. Mom, Ellie started, her voice cracking. Her mom held up a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. Don't, she said, her voice shaking. I can't believe this. How long? How could you? Ryan stepped forward, his tone steady but filled with regret. It wasn't planned, he said softly, but it's not what you think. Their mom shot back, her voice rising. I just saw. She stopped, her voice breaking as tears welled in her eyes. I need some time. I can't deal with this right now. She turned and walked away, the sound of her bedroom door slamming shut reverberating through the house. Ellie and Ryan stood in stunned silence, the weight of what had just happened pressing heavily on them. What do we do now? Ellie whispered, her voice filled with fear. Ryan reached for her hand, his grip firm but reassuring. We face it, he said simply. Together. Despite the chaos around them, Ellie felt a strange sense of calm in his presence. Whatever happened next, she knew they couldn't undo what had been done. But they could decide how to move forward, no matter how messy or complicated it got.